Rover's entrance to the industrial line was near the tracks where the Crusaders had found me. Since I didn't relish the thought of crawling through more of Riverside's ruins getting shot at, we were taking an alternative route under the town. This way, we'd hopefully avoid the Half-Heart Gang's hit-and-run potshots. Water dripped, trickled, and splashed through the countless cracks in the walls and ceiling of the train tunnel. Rusted train cars hunkered on decaying rails, the bones of countless ponies within. In more than a few places, blackened and wet skeletons hung through warped window frames, terrifying testaments to the occupants' last moments. Scotch tape hung close to me, shying away from the remains. More lay on the sides of the tunnel, and when a bone snapped under hoof, the filly jumped nervously. I was more concerned about the steady, low clicking of my pip-buck. "What happened to them all?" Scotch Tape asked as she peeked at bones frozen in postures that made it look like they were still trying to pry open doors of the train car. "When the balefire bombs exploded, one of them must have breached the train tunnel. The tunnel acted like a chimney, carrying the flames along and burning up everything in its path. Afterwards, I think ponies tried to take shelter in here, and the radiation finished them off." Glory said solemnly, "The enervation keeps the remains from rotting further." "Have I mentioned today how much I love this place?" P21 said as he clambered over some collapsed ceiling. "Could be worse," Rampage said with a chuckle. "I know it could be worse. I expect it to get worse," P21 said as he looked ahead at the striped pony. "In fact, things are so pleasant right now that it's starting to make me feel paranoid." The sea page splashed around our hooves as we picked our way along the rusted tracks. To be honest, I was getting a little paranoid as well. We'd been moving along the tracks for nearly half an hour, and there was no way to keep half a dozen ponies quiet. We should have been drawing all kinds of trouble, but my EFS remained clear. We reached the end of the Luna line at Museum Station and picked our way up the muddy concrete stairs. This was a cold and heavy rain with fat drops that slammed down onto us with almost perfect impacts. Standing at the subway entrance across from the museum, I looked down at my friends. Every pony was cold and wet. "Let's get out of the rain for an hour. The loading dock is open." The last time I was here, I was a bit too drunk to remember exactly how trashed we'd left the building. After 2 battles, mine, and whatever else had happened 2 centuries ago, the museum was definitely looking a bit worse for wear. Somebody had gone through and tossed the place of anything of value. Maybe it'd been the survivors from the ponies who'd attacked me. I supposed it was payment enough for what I'd done to them. The lights were even more shot than I remembered. They flickered and flashed sporadically, and speakers slurred incoherent words and phrases like a mob of drunken ghosts. The bodies that had been left and were desecrated rather than rotting. Enervation. I suppose that, in time, they'd get so dry that they'd disintegrate rather than rot, leaving only bones and ligaments behind. "Well, at least it's out of the rain," Glory said with the attempt at a bright smile. "Yeah, and 9.1 on the creepometer," Scotch Tape added. Suddenly she jumped and pulled out a wrench, gripping it in her jaws as she pointed a hoof at the door to the mineral display. I looked and saw red marks, and heard the telltale scuttle. "Just rad roaches. Calm down." There was a long, low rumble of thunder, and my mane crawled as the lights went dark, then slowly flickered back to life again. The building didn't seem to know which ambient music to play, and so 2 melodies slurred together. "Every pony stay close, just in case." Some pony had absconded with not just the dragon's skeleton's remain and claw, but also with its fangs as well. "Well, that's just not fair," I muttered. "Oh, that's right. Only Blackjack has the right to a cool and deadly weapon in the wasteland. Celestia forbid some pony elves take them for their own survival. P21 said sarcastically as he poked through the bones for even so much as a pinky toe claw. Really? How did she get that right? Glory asked politely as she looked at the bones. She caught our shocked looks, and her ears folded back a little. I mean, it's quite convenient for her. I smiled and then blinked. Well, there might just be a cool and deadly weapon here for me after all, I said as I wrapped my tail around P21's neck and tugged him after me. This way, Snarky McSnarkerton. I let him go and trotted to the sword case I'd been forced to leave earlier. So, Master Lockpicker, ready for a challenge? Think you can get this open? I asked as I tapped the sword case. The blade sat still in its crushed blue velvet. He looked at the weapon in surprise, then narrowed his eyes at the compact lock. Let's find out. He took out his screwdriver and pins. I turned to the others. In the meantime, let's see if there's anything here that was missed. Lacuna, can you watch his back? The purple alicorn gave an elegant bow overhead, but looked at the sword with an odd expression of unease. Okay, well, best put my best hoof forward. Okay, scotch tape with me, I said as I looked at the filly with a small smile. She looked back, a little curious and slightly wary. I turned to Glory and Rampage. Can you two sweep upstairs? The Grey Pegasus nodded. Sure. Splitting up in a creepy building might have been a recipe for disaster, but it saved time. As Rampage and Glory headed upstairs, I went to the Rocks of Equestria exhibit. Vigilance floated ahead of me, the 12mm pistol sweeping across anything that looked remotely threatening. Long clear cases stretched in neat rows up and down the long room. The sight of a poster of Twilight Sparkle wearing a mining helmet and holding a rock in her hoof, over a caption reading, "Rocks are cool," struck me as incredibly dorky. Okay, she created Gardens of Equestria, but there was no doubt she was an egghead through and through. Most of the cases had been ignored. The mineral samples were just rocks, and one thing the wasteland had was plenty of rocks. The only display that had been touched was a large display of magic gems that glittered in their armored case. I could tell it was an armored case because it looked like some pony had tried to use dynamite to blast it open, and still the case was quite intact. I could even smell the char. So, how are you doing? I asked errantly as I used a magic bullet to turn a skittering radroach into goo. The filly jumped. I wasn't sure if it was just from the question or the shot. She spat her 9mm automatic into a legs pocket that served as a holster. I'm fine, she said with a hard look around her. Just don't like this place. It's a lot different from the stable, isn't it? I frowned too as I looked at the room that was flickering. She gave me a no-duh look. Well, there's a place near here. It's called Chapel. There's a bunch of ponies your age who live there. They're called the Crusaders. They've lost their families. I'm sure they'd be glad to have you. You know more about machines and the like than any of them. She didn't answer right away. She stared at a pile of rubbish with that hard expression. Then after a few seconds, she glanced at me. I'm fine. Scotch. I trotted next to her and put a hoof across her shoulder. You're not fine. None of us are. A pony that's fine would probably run screaming from the room at first sight of what we've dealt with. She sighed, her olive body drooping a little. Mom died a while ago. I remember her telling me that she'd help me go over the terminal technician manual when she got home. I was having problems with passing that class. She looked right at me with the dark blue-green eyes behind her goggles. She told me that if I thought it was tough, if I just toughed it out, it would all make sense. I just had to be tough. Then I was told by Rivets that I'd be taking Mom's place. I didn't even have a chance to say anything before she was recycled. In the morning, I had a mother. In the evening, Her voice caught and she drew a shaky breath. I didn't. She sniffed and rubbed her nose, pointing her hoof at me. Then, every pony went crazy, and then you showed up. And then, one morning I woke up with a clogged disaster to fix. And in the evening, every pony I knew was dead. She glared at me, her lips pressing tightly together. And you killed them. Scotch, I had to. If I hadn't, we'd all have become crazed razors, too. The filly said as she closed her eyes and nodded. I know. But now I don't have Mom, or a home, or anything. All I have are you and your friends. You're the last bit of stable 99 I have. And you left too, and... Her voice trembled again as she clenched her teeth together. And I don't want to lose any pony else. I'm going to be tough. She pressed her face to my chest and gave a soft little sob. I'm not crying, she said softly amidst the tears. I know, Scotch. I said softly as I put a hoof across her shoulders, sitting with her. I'm sorry. We were all broken. We were all hurting. All of us were playing this game for stakes we didn't understand. Was this why P21, Glory, Rampage, Lacuna, and Scotch followed me? Because I pointed in a direction, and any direction, even hell itself, was better than sitting around and slowly falling apart. Big Daddy had once tried to save Hoofington. Golden Blood had wanted to save Equestria. This was what I was trying to save. Just 5 ponies. I looked across the room at the rows and rows of rocks. Had there really been a time when they mattered more than ending a pointless war? Why was that display broken open? As I stared across the room, I spotted the only display that had been successfully breached. The explosion hadn't just destroyed the armored glass. It had blasted out a chunk of the wall. That had taken a lot more than just dynamite. Scotch Tape seemed to sense my attention was elsewhere. She lifted her goggles, wiped her eyes, and looked at the blasted display as well. What? What's wrong? I don't know. I said softly, but my heart was thudding, and my mane felt like it was trying to stand on end. Keep your gun out, I whispered as I walked slowly towards the case. Debris and mud fanned out in front of the display. Broken stars crushed under hoof as I looked at the plaque, which had broken off. I levitated the last plaque, turning the heavy plate over. Rocks from the sky, meteorites and meteor fragments recovered from the Hoofington area, Everfree Forest, and across Equestria. A glob of wet mud slowly crawled down the front as the spot right between my shoulder blades tingled. Wait, wet mud?